Think back to 1997 in Malaysia. The skies turned a thick, toxic brown as peat fires from neighboring Indonesia blanketed the region in smog. On the ground, the situation was just as dire. Reservoirs serving the Klang Valley plummeted to critical levels, leaving households lining up for hours just to fill plastic buckets from rationed water tankers. This image shows the massive red and orange temperature anomaly zones stretching across the Pacific during that time. It's the footprint of a double lock, a rare event where a severe El Niño and a positive Indian Ocean Dipole develop simultaneously, effectively shutting off convective rainfall across the region. While the reservoirs dried up, the Asian financial crisis was simultaneously tearing through regional markets. The ringgit dropped violently, and regional consumer purchasing power evaporated almost overnight. As bad as 1997 was, the two disasters operated on separate tracks. The weather did not crash the currency, and the financial collapse did not cause the drought. They simply happened at the same time, forcing citizens to absorb two isolated blows at once. Fast forward to today, and forecasters are tracking a virtually identical atmospheric setup. Current oceanic models point to a massive double-lock climate anomaly forming across the Pacific, threatening severe, sustained drought conditions for 2026. The economic threat now comes from an energy shock triggered by war in the Middle East. The immediate catalyst is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. By choking off the transit channel that normally handles roughly 20% of the world's oil, crude prices have rocketed past $100 a barrel. In 1997, a devalued currency hurt wallets but didn't physically impede farming or power generation. Today's energy shock directly inflates the physical cost of operating the infrastructure the country relies on. The energy spike and the climate anomaly are moving toward a single point, where the war-driven fuel costs are positioned to multiply the physical damage of the drought. Let's trace how this affects food security. When a severe drought hits, domestic rice paddy yields drop rapidly as the soil cracks and the crops undergo severe moisture stress. To compensate, farmers have to pump in water. That requires massive amounts of diesel fuel for irrigation systems, alongside heavily petroleum-based chemical fertilizers to treat the failing soil. This creates a brutal operational trap. The lack of rain forces farmers to run those irrigation pumps around the clock, precisely when the geopolitical conflict has pushed the price of diesel to its highest point. Once the surviving harvest is finally ready, moving those diminished crops to local markets requires fleets of diesel-powered trucks, adding yet another layer of inflated fuel costs to the final product. Before the drought has even finished damaging the physical harvest, the energy shock has already baked severe inflation into every single step of the agricultural supply chain. Now apply that exact same compounding logic to logistics. Back in 1997, the drying peatlands ignited, creating regional visibility hazards so severe they grounded flights across Southeast Asia. If 2026 fires return, they hit a paralyzed supply chain. Red Sea conflicts forced maritime shipping into massive detours around Africa. To circumvent delays, businesses use air freight, but airlines imposed fuel surcharges up to 40% to cover skyrocketing jet fuel costs. Combine the two and the picture gets grim. If seasonal drought intensifies and the peat fires return, the resulting haze will ground flights within a logistics network that is already hyper-expensive and managing rerouted global traffic. The supply chain currently has zero slack. Geopolitical conflict has maximized transit costs globally, leaving no room to absorb a regional climate visibility crisis. To shield citizens from these global costs, the Malaysian government relies on heavy subsidies to cap retail fuel prices, particularly for RON 95 gasoline. Fiscal data shows this defense failing rapidly. The monthly fuel subsidy bill exploded from 700 million to a towering 4 billion ringgit. Then the drought arrives. Rural communities run diesel generators constantly, causing extra fuel demand to spike aggressively, shattering a strained national budget. Compounding the issue, the widening gap between Malaysia's artificially low fuel prices and actual market rates in neighboring countries encourages widespread cross-border smuggling, bleeding the treasury even faster. The public funds that a government would normally deploy to build water infrastructure and distribute disaster relief are instead being burned at the pump, simply to suppress the global energy shock. Society survived the 1997 climate disaster because it had a buffer. cheap energy, and relatively stable global transport kept the physical mechanics of the country running, even as the banks failed. Going into 2026, that economic buffer is entirely depleted. The geopolitical war has stretched the nation's financial defenses to their absolute limit prior to the climate crisis arriving. To prepare, citizens need to brace for inescapable compounded inflation. Because water pumping and transport both rely heavily on oil, the cost of every basic good, from vegetables to your daily commute, will reflect this convergence. For businesses, the immediate directive is to localize your supply chains.
Relying on distant suppliers means exposing your daily operations to both maritime war blockades and haze-related aviation delays. Individuals should factor in the likelihood of strict government fuel rationing. Securing decentralized home water storage and alternative energy backups is crucial to do now, before demand outpaces supply. The El Niño of 1997 was an unlucky coincidence. The forecast for 2026 is a collision course, a scenario where a geopolitical conflict and a climate anomaly are hitting the nation's core vulnerabilities at the exact same time.